and everything. Welcome to whatever version of the new economics discussion series this is. I think this is our 5th meeting. Anyway.
Right. Yep.
And we're going to look at chapters 5 and 6. Chapter 5 is on leadership, and chapter 6 is on managing a people, sort of related to each other. I noticed this time through, I guess I'd never noticed before, in chapter 5 when Deming mentions Hansen, he mentions that he died in October of, I forget the date, October 1990. And I was just wondering whether, since that would have been while Deming was writing this, if that's what sparked him to use Hansen as an example of a leader. What other reasons might he have used Hansen?
I found that whole piece really interesting. I was like, oh, so this is right. This is essentially how we end up with the BLS, right?
Yeah.
And its initial sampling method. I reached out to Tim via email about this as well, because I feel like I don't understand, I guess, the logistics of in what this would have been in the 1920s or early 30s, trying to do a comprehensive survey and trying to get that amount of data back from people and process it is just challenging. So sampling methods are just required. And I feel like I don't have a good grasp of like how you get from, oh, I've got this giant population and I want to figure out the right way to construct a sample from it. And so there's like a hole in my knowledge of statistics there.
Yeah. Well, if you go to page 119 on second edition, it says that Congress specified the study should be complete every household.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's sheer madness. And that's almost like you need to have an entire like a cottage industry or even a small industry to actually go out there and collect data.
The idea of trying to put that work on the postal system made some kind of sense to me, right? You had essentially postal workers visiting a large number of residences on any particular day, right? Like the theory there, I'm like, oh, that's not the craziest thing I ever heard, but the postal carriers, like, it feels like they barely finished their routes as it is. And like, do they really have time to add this like data collection task? So
Yeah.
Yeah, the difficulty with large amounts of data is especially if there are surveys, is the non-response and whether or not you've done good enough testing to know that when you get a response, it means what you think it means. I offered people examples of how statistical sampling can be of value. If you've got a bag of pennies that's somewhere between 1 million and 2 million pennies, and you start counting one at a time, it's going to take you a while to get through it, and your chances of getting the right answer are not greatly increased compared to doing a sampling.
Mm-hmm.
And the sampling might even improve the accuracy of it. So there are places for that, but certainly structuring. I mean, he cut it down to 52 districts, and I'm making a wild guess that's the 48 contiguous states and maybe Alaska, Hawaii, and the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. I don't know where they came up with 52. But
anyway,
the concept,
I found the whole thing very interesting.
yes. Well, yeah, and Deming in a lot of places in places here, but a lot of places in other books, he complains about the fact that a whole bunch of statisticians are what he calls hacks because they don't understand statistics and they're out teaching people and they're teaching people the wrong things. And that made him angry that people that should know better didn't know better. And I know better than to decide I'm going to be the guy that's going to figure out how to do the sampling so we can decide what the unemployment rate is. I'm smart enough to know I better go ask somebody who knows how to do that rather than head off on my own. So, but why Morris? Why choose Morris? I mean, if you look at all the leaders you can think of, whether they're political or corporate or anywhere else, why would he choose Hansen? Why might he choose
other
him?
people that were statisticians or would be statisticians, or they were statisticians, came up with methods for counting unemployment numbers, but they didn't have a real work. I don't think they had an aim in mind, or they didn't have a full understanding or a working definition of what unemployed means or employed means. And so very vague and without a clear definition of what you're counting, you're just going to get a bunch of numbers, and how you manipulate it. They probably manipulated the numbers the same way. It's just that their definition of the numbers coming in varied wildly across the dozens of statisticians that they employed before Morris or Hansen came along.
I think he names Hansen, I would not have known who Morris Hansen was had it not been for this book and this example. But it seems, pretty straightforward that it's a way to illustrate or to provide an example of someone having a theory, okay, a theory of knowledge in this case, or theory of probability, and also a plan, as with respect to the plan, do, study, act cycle. He had a plan. Let's try this. I think it will work because, and was able to make some predictions, presumably, and then could verify the accuracy. And the other thing that strikes me is that he went against, someone already mentioned that you're supposed to complete every household, and so he had the courage, if you will, to override that law that was made in ignorance, and at a time of maybe a much smaller population. So a couple reasons there for this choice of person and example, in my view.
Yeah, I think it matches what Deming has defined as what a leader is. I also like the idea that he's way down in the organization. He's not anybody at the top. He's not a manager. He's not anything. He's just a worker bee. And I think Deming's trying to help us grasp that leadership and a leader is not a job position. It's a description of an act of a person who engages in a certain activity. Manager, however, is a position. They have a job description for it and all that stuff. And we mistakenly call, and Russ Akoff used to remind us of that all the time. Managers and leaders are different. Some managers can be leaders and are leaders, but just because you're a manager doesn't make you a leader, but we use them as synonyms. And Akoff points out that it might be better to distinguish between those two words rather carefully, because if you start deciding your Boeing company and you have a place where you're going to train a whole bunch of people, they put them up in a hotel, a really nice place that's on the grounds there, and then they have a week or 2 weeks worth of training going on, and they call that their leadership center. And guess who they send?
Managers.
All their managers.
Managers. You think the peons? I got to go because I was becoming a navigator, they called them, continuous improvement expert or something.
Hmm.
And I got to go, but I didn't get to stay on campus with them. I had to find my own lodgings outside.
Hmm.
That's funny.
The thing that was interesting as well about that, and apologies for just being a bit late, was with Morris, was that he was embedded in a system where the leaders obviously recognized the value in what he was doing and gave him the space to be able to to do that. So I think that he recognizes those people around him that actually gave him the air, I guess, to be able to conduct that activity. And I think that's really important for all of us. It's not just us as individuals, but it's the environment that we're in, and whether or not it's whether we have managers that shut us down, or leaders that shut you down, or people that actually support you and give you an opportunity to to show what you can actually do.
And Deming, I think, sort of, I don't know, it's almost satirical where he talks about people send him notes about they have these great ideas, so great that he doesn't even understand them.
So Tim, I didn't understand that phrase, what you just said, when you said, so great that I cannot understand it.
He's
Can you
saying he's
point that
saying
out
he's,
for me?
he's saying these are great ideas, but he doesn't understand them, and he's intimating that the people that are sending him those great ideas couldn't get through to the people they were working with in a way that those people understood them, which is probably why they got rejected. And I think he's poking at, you need to have a plan and a way to explain it and the ability to explain it to people so that they will get on board.
Yeah, okay.
But I think that's Deming's dry wit saying, the plan was so great, I didn't understand it.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of the spiel I give some people, I tell people, learn to be a good writer, learn to be a good speaker. And so, and they say, oh no, I'm just going to sit here and do whatever, do my technical things. So, well, at a certain point, you're going to need to communicate that to other people. If you
Yes.
don't have good communication skills, somebody else is with communication skills with less technical aptitude than you may take those ideas and be able to package it in a way that's more appealing to the managed leadership or the people who will actually accept those things. And you'll be left out in the cold. So if you don't want people to take credit for your work, you better learn how to speak well. And that went over with a few people, but it didn't always go over well with most. Unfortunately, engineers typically are introverts anyway, so telling them that they have to be good communicators is like, no.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm very glad I finally learned how to write in my mid-20s. Like it was right. You hit a point where it's you become a leader, a like senior developer or whatever, and now you're having to communicate all the time, and you can't keep all your projects in your head. You have to write them down at that point, and then that was the point where I got good at writing. Right,
Yeah.
hundreds of pages a year now, easy.
Yeah.
What else about leaders and leadership in this chapter strikes you?
Actually, on page 125, oh, this is going into management of people. Sorry, I'll hold on.
That's all right. We can go there.
Okay. On page 125, I think it was, role of a manager of people. And I think bullet point 1 was, a manager understands and conveys to his people the meaning of a system, blah, blah, blah. And then he helps his people see themselves as components in a system. And this goes to you. And Scott, did you just jump off the call? Because I was talking to you.
Or maybe he got thrown off. Who knows with the
Maybe got thrown off. Maybe you got that
Wi-Fi.
crappy
See him there
Wi-Fi
still.
with that. Huh?
Scott Olson's still here.
Yeah,
Oh,
what's up?
oh, I didn't see you. Hi, Scott.
Hey there.
That kind of, you had asked me a question a couple of weeks ago with regards to how did I have that conversation with one of my analysts
Right.
to, you know, start thinking of himself as part of the system. So those bullet points 1 and 2 in that section was more or less the approach I was trying to take when I'm having that discussion with him. So if you ask that question, I think points 1 and 2 do a better job than what I tried to do a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it would. The reason why I brought it up is it's because I saw that as a it wasn't right. We were talking, and then it was a practical how you're actually putting into practice, and even in a challenging environment. If I got it right, you had worked there for quite a few years, but and you called it a red pen company. So even in a challenging environment against the system, the official system, you were working your right that practice with this person. And that's maybe that's coming back to the topic of leadership. That is in a way, right? Leaders maybe go against the system. I'm just kind of trying to connect some dots here about what a true leader is. Not somebody assigned. A true leader is actually going to paths, discovering new paths, right? Taking it, and maybe it's not totally brand new, but I'm just saying in your case, Yoshio, you were taking this person, right? That was, so yeah, I think that was an example of leadership. You know, in one way, right? If leadership is a bunch of small acts, no grand, it could be grandiose, right? Save the world, but maybe small acts is right. Adding them all up.
You just have, even in a red pen company, if you work hard enough, you can create little pockets of blue pen behavior and blue pen attitudes. So that's what I try to do, you know.
Sounds like
And
that.
you'll find in examining your own behavior and the behavior of others is sometimes you're leading and sometimes you're following, and sometimes you're doing both at the same time. While you're leading this group, you're following some other person who is in essence leading you. So it's not a black and white thing.
No, it's managing the gray.
Yes. And as you're talking about it, leadership in a prevailing style of management company involves going against the grain of the prevailing style of management thinking. So that requires some expertise. And
or you just accept that you may get yourself fired.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, I told you
forge
that
ahead.
was a couple sentences away from a trip to HR for me. So,
but and certainly you can do that. The longer you've been at the company, the more you have to lose by getting fired. If you've only been in the company a year and a half, you might not have much to lose. Yeah. So there's all that working at you. And one of the things I remember, I probably got it from What Color's Your Parachute? Said if you're trying to change your organization and you're pushing so hard that they decide they don't want to put up with you anymore and get rid of you, don't feel down. That's not a company you want to work for. Don't worry about it. Go find somewhere else.
And we find that here in the text, it says, if you cannot argue with your boss, he is not worth working for. Lieutenant General Leslie Sung USA stated in 1936 at the rank of captain. So, we should be able to argue an exchange of ideas with our boss. And we've gone horribly wrong if we're in a world where we can't do that. And I don't think he means it in the sense of just argue for the sake of arguing, because we're always about an aim. We're always about trying to achieve a common purpose. And arguing for that to exchange ideas is incredibly important, rather than just being a part of the system, as in a nut or a bolt that just acts on something without any level of thinking. Thinking is part of the program, isn't it?
It is.
I really enjoyed that quote. And what came to my mind is when he uses the term argue, is challenging mental models or ways of thinking, as opposed to being aggressive or somehow mean in some way, but debating and challenging thought
It's
for growth. So,
argument in the philosophical sense
The Greek
or
sense.
usage. Yeah.
One of the opposite to me of that, and I love that quote too. In fact, I quoted it to one of my bosses once, who I could do that. And I said, you know what, this is really rare. I really value this in you, that I can do this. But what I realized, the opposite of it is really one opposite. But from my perspective, because I'm experiencing that sometimes in some of the projects, is the opposite is the yes man. Right, it's you just got to nod. That's pretty common, right? And I see that in certain cultures and what happens. And the extreme is these totalitarian, right? You're just for people for different reasons. They're just afraid to even say anything but nod, say yes, and make it snappy.
Yeah.
And that's scary, right? Because that might be more of the world we're living in. And our businesses and our schools are. That's the system. I think that's right. And the leader goes against that, not, the yes man, but it's not easy always.
Yeah. And cultures, some cultures, it doesn't have to be a totalitarian environment for that to be the case. There's the case of the Korean airline airplane that crashed coming into LAX, I think it was. The captain wasn't doing the right thing, but the junior officers were afraid to tell him, hey, you're doing the wrong thing, just because there's a strict hierarchy in the Korean culture. And so he kept his mouth shut, and then the obvious thing happened, and a lot of people died as a result of that. So,
I had a boss once who, when I was a second level manager, had managers reporting to me, and he gave me an assignment, wanted me to do something, and I said, okay, boss, I can do that because you're my boss and you gave me the assignment, and I feel obligated to do it. On the other hand, I feel obligated to tell you when you give me an assignment that's stupid, this is a stupid assignment.
I've had those conversations too.
And he didn't throw me out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that an unusual, in my working life? I think maybe I've always been lucky that I've always been in environments where you've had open conversations and difficult conversations, and you're, maybe I was a troubled person, but I always felt it was really important to be able to have a conversation with somebody that I was working for on things that I felt were important, or I had different ideas on, or a part of it was maybe even trying to learn, to try and get a better understanding of myself. And a really good way of doing that is just having an in-depth conversation.
Yeah.
you're lucky. Count yourself lucky.
Yeah, and
Right.
sometimes it's the subtle cues you get, like right when you bring up something that isn't what they want to hear, but it's not radical necessarily. It's just what, like, let's say what a user, like, right, in some projects we work on, we have interdependencies between departments. And when you talk with one department, they say something, and it's not like we're throwing somebody under the bus, but how open is that other party? And it sounds like when we're talking about, especially managing up, right, or somebody who has that role that is more power over, perhaps, how open are they? And of course, there's also the messenger, how we speak it, right? So, and maybe your personality, Richard, might, because I get that, right? Your personality kind of has that, probably able to receive it. Sometimes I probably come across as a bit, especially when it is attention, right? So some of it could be my fault, right? The messenger's fault about how and the tone, but I'm just sharing some thoughts about how these systems and the individuals in it kind of contribute. And maybe this is the psychology aspect, but I'll stop there.
Certainly that has an effect, and Deming talks about that. He calls being able, it's an interesting use of the word. He talks about him being able to help somebody else see what you're talking about, and he calls it tact.
Mm-hmm.
And that's tact is not telling your boss to go to hell, but it's a little bit more than tact in order to get across a new idea that's counter to what the boss is thinking.
Mhm. Yeah, I think a strong part of that, and I'm kind of inferring here broadly what Deming was getting at, but Deming probably wouldn't use the word vulnerable or vulnerability. But I think when one is, does not have positional authority, and you are trying to, um, inquire, or you're trying to make space for some new ideas, it's key to share your thinking. This idea comes from Argyris and the mutual learning model, but to state your position, if you will, but then how did you get there? How did you arrive at that perspective, that point of view? And to be, open and explain that, put your thinking out there, which many of us are reluctant to do because that opens us up to criticism or critique. And then once you've done that, you've exposed your thinking, you've shared your thinking, then the next step is a genuine question to the other person. How do you see it? Here's how I see it. How do you see it? And for both of those to be open, but the vulnerability only comes the vulnerability is necessary in the first invitation, if you will. Someone has to do that first, take that chance, take that risk, and then, ask the other person and then listen to them. So that's kind of what I meant earlier when I put in the chat, argument need not be adversarial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of like what I've been reading, a bunch of books on teaming, and psychological safety in organizations, and trying how do you foster an environment of psychological safety so people can have these conversations without too much issue.
Oh,
But
I'd love to know what you're reading sometime.
oh yeah, I'll toss some links into the chat for you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, don't
It
bother
fits.
everyone else if they're not interested, but I
It
am.
fits. It fits Deming's idea that new knowledge comes from outside and by invitation.
Mm-hmm.
So, you could, invitation comes from the person you're talking to. If he's the one you expect to start to discuss the potential for new knowledge. So
Exactly.
you have to frame things in a way that's going to be an invitation to him, as opposed to a challenge to him that he's going to have to fight.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying that, Tim, because that makes me think about some of the subtleties of systems thinking, particularly within an organizational setting. And we have, lots and lots of, in any organization, lots of nested systems. So in one situation, you might be outside the system. I might not be part of the executive leadership team, but I'm talking to a member of that team. And so I am outside their system, so to speak. Then there's another circle that encompasses both of us, and we're not outside the system. So I think there's some subtle insights to be gained from thinking about what is the boundary of the system that I'm working in. And I noticed that the very first of Deming's list of role of the new manager is understanding the system. And that's a big deal.
Yes. It's and Danella Meadows claims we can't understand systems and we can't control them, but we can learn to dance with them. So
Yeah, haven't used that quote in too many of my interactions with senior management, but yes, I get that for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's all about emergence and uncertainty and,
yep.
and trying to allow yourself to become comfortable with that and to let go of this notion that you have to know everything and you have to control things in order to be seen as effective.
Yeah, you can't actually do either of those things,
Yeah.
and it was a weird it was very weird to try and just like be like, okay, things are gonna happen and you're just gonna do what you can to like understand why things are happening and see where you can push on like the things you have access to and can control
Mhm.
to improve things. Right. Like, what can I do to make build times faster if I don't, for me, for in software, right? How do I make the build go faster when I have no control over the hardware that I'm running it on, for example?
Exactly.
And like,
Yeah,
what
yeah,
can I
yeah.
do? Like, what can I work on? Oh, we need to build less of it. We need to cache more. Oh, I don't even have a machine where I can maintain those caches. Then what do I do?
Yeah. What if we had a conversation once a week that, expedited our understanding of each other? And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden we were able to do and, make all those kinds of things, right? Not necessarily turning a dial on something, right?
Mhm.
To speed it up, so to speak.
It occurs to me that all the data gets collected in, especially big corporations, it gets collected because it helps make those people in charge feel as if they're in control of something until the data goes bad. And then they tell me the system's broken. And I frequently am able to help them understand their system's not broken. Their system will produce that result that they just got every once in a while, maybe more frequently than they'd like, but it's not broken. It's 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 doing what it's designed to do with all the rules and regulations you have in place. This is where you get. If you
Rules
want
and
to,
regulations and assumptions and
yep,
inferences and beliefs.
yeah, you want to challenge some of those things and try something different, we might get a different result. We might get a worse result.
You might, but you'll know something either way.
That's right. You will have learned. So that's the benefit. The plan, do, study, act cycle will help you understand whether you should continue with that theory or it turns out not to be such a great theory.
Yeah.
I remember with executives when I was in the continuous improvement office here, we'd sometimes go to a team and say, hey, we got an idea for making an improvement here. And I said, well, what'll it cost? I said, well, it might cost us $8,000 to conduct the experiment, set up the experiment, conducts the experiment, and get a result. They said, well, do you guarantee how soon or when am I going to get
Yeah.
the 8,000 back? I said, I can guarantee that we will learn something. I can't guarantee that we will make anything better. I can only guarantee we're going to learn.
Well, like that learning approach seems real. It feels like a lot of organizations are really scared to like let that process play out, right?
Yep.
You and from my perspective, I'm like, it's the only way to
Yeah.
function. So there's no knowing. I can't know that like a contract is going to get canceled. I can't know that the government is going to shut down. Like I used to work for, right? I worked at a government contractor during a shutdown a bunch of years back, and like there was no we missed payroll.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's interesting because that comes a couple things when you're thinking about this. We've talked before, and one of these is the concept of control, our society of wanting to control, right? And then what you were saying, we were talking about, and that word vulnerability, and even the system and the boundary and forgive me because I'm just connecting dots, and what it actually elicits is this system boundary that's permeable, right? So we have these boundaries, but to me, this vulnerability is when you talk individually or in groups, that the way to do this really is yeah, we have boundaries, but they're somewhat permeable, right? They have to be, because that's how you learn or you get new, if they're closed. And that's where I think I'm saying, like, when you bump up against the actual argument, when somebody doesn't actually want to hear, you got closed systems, right? It's just a closed, either they're closed mental model, but there's also not just intellectual, there's the emotional, right? And I know sometimes people are just not ready for whatever reason. So, yeah, I think it's just interesting, the words that I'm hearing and how they interrelate with the individual system, right? Individual players, but then as teams together, they have their own boundaries and vulnerabilities and how they all play out. It's fascinating.
Yes.
Complicated too.
It makes the world a very interesting place, but it's also exhausting.
It can be.
Do you think some of this is like today's management philosophy, kind of like, to paraphrase Deming, like managing to like special cause variation instead of common cause? You know, like treating all the special cases as though it was is like managing to that instead of the day to day. Like, it just struck me yesterday with the big Amazon AWS outage. You know, seeing all the people on LinkedIn, the armchair architects, kind of coming out and saying, like, you know, what everybody should have done. Well, this is a rare thing that happens, right? Should you manage your business, everything, your employees and everything, just for that rare case? I would argue no, but
Right.
I mean, it feels like management today is kind of like you know, going off of the, you know, like the breaking news headlines, you know, versus like the, like, you know, what actually happens in the real world. I don't know.
Well, Cole, right? I'm gonna guess you have a fair bit of experience with this, probably both of us, right? Trying to architect things so that you can run multi-cloud, so that you can be like, oh yeah, we want to be able to cut over to AWS if Google goes down, and we want to be able to do the inverse. That is a very, very hard engineering problem all on its own. And to accomplish that goal where you can be multi-tenant, a multi-cloud tenant like that, you have to architect your system that you essentially lose all the value of those platforms, because you need to architect in a way that you're using like the lowest common denominator between them. And so then what's the point of being in the ecosystem at all? Go run your own data center at that point.
Yeah, that Deming, in his helping us distinguish between common cause and special cause, remember a case where a company had a whole lot. They put a bunch of parts into a furnace and burned up the parts. So they went back to see that had never happened before. They're chasing it down. Interestingly enough, I don't know how they discovered the cause. The cause was that the natural gas provider provided a natural gas that had more BTUs per cubic centimeter by a hell of a lot. And so they said, well, that's probably, we better ask. They asked the company, how frequently does that happen? And the gas company told them. And so then their decision was, do we need to put something in that samples the gas and the cost on that, or is this going to happen so infrequently that that cost is sunk and isn't really doing us any good? And they decided, no, they're not going to put it in anything. This is going to happen once every 6 or 8 years. They're going to lose a lot of material they've got in there compared to paying for a sampling, getting a sampling machine in there and executing all the things you needed to do to pay attention to it. Just ignore it. And when it happens again, say, check to make sure that's what happened and not something else, and then go on about your business.
Amen.
You don't have to fix special causes.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You
That's
can
such a
decide.
hard thing to grasp.
Yes, I know. We have it Rocketdyne and NASA for years. Every time something doesn't go the way it's supposed to by specification or the way we anticipated it would go, we think we need to take some level of corrective action. I'm thinking, no, you don't.
So
In some cases, you don't need to do a damn thing. Everything's okay.
That's how heroes are made,
Yes.
solving
how do you-
special causes, you know.
Yeah.
So the plane, so Yoshio gave, and I don't know, I don't know the answer. I'm just putting this out there. So the Cole gave an example. I think that one's easier to say, you know, because it's more of a system, and it's Amazon Web Services, you know, going down and special cause. How about the plane example with the pilot? And I know there's every day the pilots, and there was a chain of command. They didn't, they kind of followed rigidly. But is that plane crash? And you know, is that not a special cause in the system? You know how plane crashes are. So you're saying, you're shaking your head, Stephen. So you're
Yeah.
saying that's common cause, a plane crash like that example, Yoshio.
Like that example, I think so, because of the cultural component.
Yeah.
And maybe it hasn't produced plane crashes before, but it's the cultural deference of authority, maybe. I don't know. I'm not an
So you're
expert on.
saying the Korean
Yeah.
cultural piece.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on that. I'm going to say just, you know, a culture where there's deference to authority,
Yeah.
that's definitely part of the system, and the situation would dictate, you know, the seriousness of
Yeah.
the outcome.
Yeah,
So,
and
yeah.
I think the National Safety and Transportation Board does remarkably well. It takes them a long time to find causes. Then when they find the causes and start going back and looking at them, they start attacking causes like that
Yeah.
fear of, you know, the chain of command. They try to attack everything, not just the
Yeah.
technical part of what's going on.
Well, NASA and the military, anytime that there's a potential for loss of life, it demands a corrective action. A loss of a shipment in the case of the furnace, delay of a shipment of a lot of parts, that's not mission critical, safety critical. So you can opt to ignore that. But anytime there's a loss of life, demands an action. And the example that I gave, the corrective action would actually have a bunch of American pilots go to Korea and give specific training on closing what's that called, Steve? The power gap or the
I didn't call it anything. I just said there was a deference to authority as
yeah.
a way of, you
Yeah,
know,
closing
in
the
relationships. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's called a power gap or something like that. Anyways, on giving giving instruction to the junior folks, junior folks and the crew members that they do have the authority. They can actually raise their hand and be heard by the senior member of the staff.
You know, I think I agree with you, Yoshio, and I think also that that particular thing of the deference to authority can happen in any culture. I think it can definitely happen in this country, just, you know, maybe due to age, or it could be to, you know, experience, or it could be to personal relationships, you know, in the cockpit, so to speak.
Yeah,
There's lots of things that I think, you know, support my thinking in terms of this being a common cause kind of.
yeah,
No one's surprised when they hear that, really, that there was this, you know, reluctance, because it happens in all organizations, not just on airplanes.
Yeah, just think about the poor engineers at Thiokol back who who were quiet about. They made as much noise as they could with their management, but it didn't go any further than that, and their management wasn't listening very well.
And they ended up way, way down the hierarchy of PowerPoint bullets.
Yep. And
Or the rubber O-ring
Yeah.
on the.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's what
Yep.
we're talking about. Yeah.
That's
Oh,
it.
I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's, yeah,
Yeah.
that makes it clear. Thanks for that, Dick. Yeah.
Is the other that Korean, is that an example of where a common cause in one system is a special
Yes.
cause in another?
Yes.
Yeah, because so that their common cause is their cultural behavior there. Yeah, that's quite common. That's how you would expect them to behave. And I guess the special cause is, that the plane would actually crash, through its settings, and nobody would do anything about it. So there's common causes in one system being special causes another. I think is an interesting thing to look at, though.
Yeah, well, there's two things going on. There's common cause versus special cause, and then the other part is what we would call failure modes and effects analysis, which is the criticality, probability of occurrence, and detectability. That's a tool that aerospace companies use to determine if the problem is worth acting on or perceived problem. So if criticality goes from loss of life, loss of mission, all the way down to nuisance. Like, oh, the engine's making a funny noise, but it's not going to bring the plane down. It's a maintenance action. Next time we're in the hangar. And then the next item is probability of occurrence, and it goes from something that can happen all the time or something that can happen rarely. The Korean Airlines situation is something that can happen rarely, and so you put that at a low probability of occurrence. So you say, oh, it's never going to happen. It's rarely going to happen. Let's ignore it. Oh, by the way, if it does happen, you're going to lose a plane full of people. Oh, okay. In that case, we take an action on it. So looking at special cause and common cause as far as airline safety goes may not be the right approach. Looking at it from a failure modes and effects analysis may be the better way to go. Just a little different perspective on what we're talking about. And then maybe as far as Amazon goes, or the AWS thing goes, if the whatever happened yesterday with Amazon Web Services, if that created global impact on health systems where people could lose their lives in hospitals, then perhaps it does require the same level of attention that a Korean Airlines pilot cockpit power dynamics demands too. So that's speculative. If AWS is just fiddling around screwing up my scores on Wordle record keeping, I'm not going to worry about it. But if it does affect performance of hospitals and access to medical care and equipment, perhaps that requires a little bit more love, even though it's something that occurs infrequently.
Well, by that same argument, Yoshi, would that create the expectation that we anticipate that rather than react to it when it does happen?
Yeah, and I'll bet you maybe not AWS, but the hospital system itself would have, maybe it's on them to make sure that their system is robust to an AWS outage.
So I think it's interesting because so common cause is loss of life is common cause. And then I see, because I know when I worked in business classes at school, I taught for a while, and it's controversial, but companies make calculations all the time about, I can't remember which automobile, might have been the Ford Pinto or something, right? They make calculations for taking out to save X dollars, knowing that they probably will lose lives, right? But this is where I think it's fascinating, because it does get into ethics and morals. And if I were honest with myself, what I see our culture do, it's less so looking at loss of life, although we say that, but ultimately I think it comes down to economic price. Like we talked about, what innovation is driven by is the dollar bill, and at some point we put a price tag or not on life, and I don't know, I think it gets definitely more interesting when we actually admit that there's a dollar bill on a human life, and they come and go.
Yeah.
Does the impact of the failure affect the category of whether it's common or special cause? I'm not sure it does. I thought common and special cause has to do with if it's a stable process. Common cause is an output you would expect, versus special cause is an output you would not expect, regardless of the type of outcome.
common cause is something that lives inside the, well, there's like 7 tests for or special cause variation, but
Like,
if you
for
have a stable
instance,
system,
what do you call it, when you kill prisoners because, what do you call that? Oh, mind block. The system in the United States, some states have it, some states don't.
Oh, capital punishment.
Death penalty, capital punishment.
Yeah.
Yep. Common cause outcome of that is death. I mean, that's the expected outcome. If it's a stable process. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a horrible example, but I don't think the outcome is the severity of the outcome necessarily is a condition or characterization of whether it's common or special.
Well, we're right. We still allow. We know that air pollution from coal power plants causes a certain number of deaths in the United States every year, and we still allow coal to be burned because the benefits were like, well, some cancer.
yeah,
Well, it seems like I'm wondering if we need to rein our thinking in a little bit and think about not a criticism, but think about from the standpoint of, who owns the process, who owns the process of flying these people across the ocean and taking off safely and landing safely, so to speak. Someone owns that process and they want it, presumably to go well. We can make that assumption. And so, uh, you know, if in their calculations, I guess that the loss of a plane and the people there is acceptable, that's a pretty interesting risk assessment that could be assessed by others outside. But whether it's a common cause or a special cause, depends on actually on the cause. And if deference to authority leads to poor decisions, that's, in my view, is common cause, and we don't have to talk about crashing a plane or anything. It's just it's any decision. Not the
yeah,
magnitude of it is less important for the sake
yeah.
of argument. And so the
And it's also a preventable
yeah.
thing too. So there was a
Well,
corrective action that was taken, and hopefully that took.
right. The air industry is an interesting example here because they have worked very hard collectively as a system to have very few air crashes, right?
Right.
My understanding is that among like what private planes and stuff, that's a little bit more of a free for all. But at the level of commercial air traffic, right?
Mhm.
We've put a lot of effort into like making the system relatively as safe as we can within like limits. It's
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
and
I
yeah,
think we're
sure
at the
there.
management end though, aren't we? We're not at the, like, if you're looking at the leadership, where he tells us with the aim of his chapter is that, the understanding of profound knowledge will lead to the transformation of management. So in our example, if there actually was a level of profound understanding, maybe there would therefore become awareness of this cultural, sort of aberration where these people aren't going to challenge. It's the leadership component is really important, and I think he spells that out from the start. It starts with that profound knowledge. We've got to get that. If we don't get profound knowledge, the rest of it is gobbledygook. It's just not going to happen. And the thing is that it's when you get the profound knowledge, you can start to go through the transformation. You can understand and think in systems. If we think of flying a plane as someone who's sitting behind the thing in a jockey, we were missing all of the systems and everything that surrounds it. Even what's the purpose of the airline or the people who are traveling. And so, to me, I think there was a huge amount, even though it's a short chapter on that leadership, that is incredibly important. And that profound knowledge is just the starting point for that transformation. So we understand those systems, and I think getting it there means it doesn't mean we do away with FMEAs, but it means that maybe we're doing more thinking up front, and so there's less risk down the line. Is probably what I'm taking from that. maybe that was a buzzkill. Sorry.
No, no. Did we lose our host or?
We did.
I think that was good though, Richard, because of risk, right? I think a lot of this is around risk and right? And there's all kinds of risks. So, yeah, I appreciated that.
Yeah, but it's when you're talking about like the risk of the washer, or whether we design a car this way or that way. I guess it's specialist subject matter experts that are, you know, highly involved in those calculations and, you know, determinations and whatever. Is this the CEO? Is the leader of the organization? I doubt it. But they're setting the framework in which that's allowed to happen. They're setting the framework that kind of says, here's the system you can operate in, and you've got free reign. So they still have ownership of the consequences of that, because they've created the system that has allowed the latitude for people to to do those things.
So, is your argument putting the onus back on the leader, the topmost like CEO, the C-suite? Is that what you're kind of
It starts and ends with leadership. If we haven't got it right at leadership, it matters not what we're doing within the organization, because it's only going to have limited success. The leader in the organization is the one that sets the system, that determines, you know, the capability, and we say that the quality of the system can't put out any better than that it's been created for. And to me, that aim of the chapter that we say on, you know, that Deming's got it on the very first thing, is that the understanding profound knowledge is the thing that leads to that transformation. So that's what's so incredibly important, to kind of get that before we go for, and that resides with the leadership. The leadership are the people who are responsible for creating that system that allows the engineers to do the calculation, and, as I say, the latitude to be able to make decisions that affect people's lives, or not. Because we all know the organizations where you can't even sign off, you know, $10 because you've got to go through 20 levels of management. Well, guess who created that? Well, it's also the leaders of the system. But, you know, the same stupid, probably system allows somebody to calculate and make a decision that's actually going to affect, you know, people's lives and an outcome of a collision. Yet that organization will probably hold you to 3 levels of management to sign off $10. It's all designed by the same leader, and they just don't necessarily have that profound knowledge, understanding. They don't understand. I guess I'm hypothesizing.
Well,
right in the oh, go ahead.
As Deming says, how could they know?
Yeah.
Right in the hypothetical organization where, well, I want to say I've worked places like that, where they're making you get sign-offs from maybe more than one person to spend $10. Right. Those policies came from somewhere. Like, something happened at some point in the organization that led them down this path. And trying to, like, understand and fight against the creation of those new rules and regulations is part of the organization's, it needs to do that to function. Right. I think there was I'll see if I can find it. There was an interesting interview with someone from the war college or something, talking about how the increased numbers of requirements on soldiers has been leading to a decrease in sort of trustworthiness, because there are more requirements than you could ever complete, and so you just have to lie about things, and that is causing essentially moral erosion within the military.
That's fascinating. Like,
I'll find it.
I kept thinking about, like, when I was reading some of this stuff around leadership, was that a lot of it comes down to trust, right? Like whether you trust your management trusts their employees or not, right? Like, do I need to have 10 levels of sign off to spend $10, or, you know, do I trust that my employees are going to do the right thing? I guess, like, in this comes back around to special versus common cause, right? The special cause is the sales rep spending $10,000 on a bottle of wine versus, you know, taking a customer out for a drink to sign a multi-million-dollar deal or something like that, you know. That would be the common, you know, like I guess I struggle with like how does management handle or how do you handle like these kind of cases where, say, it's maliciousness or fraud, like where the employee doesn't deserve the trust?
Yeah. You know, when you were talking,
broken
Cole,
it.
I was trying to visualize, you know, plotting of the dots and trying to think what would the x-axis be, and I guess it might be something like acceptable expenditures to close a deal or something like that. You know, I don't know what it is exactly, but if we actually kept track of that, and then, you know, we would come along, and all of a sudden there's a $10,000 bottle of wine, and it's outside the control limits of, you know, what we've been seeing for months or years or whatever, then, you know, we check that out. And, you know, maybe it is still part of the common cause. We just need to, you know, change our definition of, you know, the system. But we would, you know, identify it in that way. And so once again, I think I'm trying to just, you know, keep us in that kind of statistical mindset with respect to common cause and special cause. I don't know if that's always required, but I've just, you know, I've been trying to see the dots as you all have been talking.
remember-
I think in Cole's example, though, for me, I'd be looking at management, so as opposed to leadership, and I expect my management to be involved with me, with their, you know, the people that they're managing on a really regular basis. So even before you're spending that $10,000, there's probably conversations that are happening, and we probably have, you know, maybe it's too much dependency on. I mean, I was going to talk about the forces of destruction because I think that drawing is absolutely fantastic, but maybe we've too much of a dependency on all of that. But because, you know, if I don't have a lazy manager, I've got someone who's actually interacting with you, understand what's going on, understand what our common aim, understand what our tactics are in this day, week, month, and what have you. We know that Cole signed off the big deal. We know that's going to be happening. And it's not even something that I'm going to be charting at some point later on in my life, I retire. It's like I'm living the experience with them because I'm close enough to them in terms of management. And I think that our management maybe today are just too aloof from what's actually going on and they're disconnected. So yeah, so therefore looking at, potentially. But if I'm close enough to you, Cole, I'll know how much of a string I need to let you out. I'll know if you're trustworthy or not. And you know what? If you're not trustworthy, it's my decision as to whether you're even part of the organization. And it's more fool me for allowing you in the organization as an untrustworthy person. So, you know, it keeps coming back to the leadership and the management that we've got in going on.
Yeah, and if you don't know whether I'm trustworthy, that makes you untrustworthy as a manager, right? To your management, right? Like, yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
There was an interesting thing that I was appalled by. My first month I was a manager. At the end of whatever month it was, they brought me a list of all the phone calls the people working for me had made. I said, "What's this for?" And they said, "Well, that's your phone bill." I said, "Okay, what do I do with it?" It says, "Well, you check the phone calls and see if any of them were not business related. And if they were not business related, you get the people to go over and pay the cashier the 50 cents or $2 or $5 for what the bill was." I was looking at that and I couldn't believe that's what they were doing. And they were doing that in every department throughout the organization.
I
I put
talked to
I put it
I,
on the shelf and I looked at it, and if it was outside what I thought was reasonable for that month, then I looked through it a little deeper to see if there was anything that I might go chase. But otherwise, it just looked like the organization had such little trust in people that if I was running around asking them to pay their 50 cents on a phone call they made to home for personal call, that just another force of destruction.
Yep.
I go to a restaurant on a fairly regular basis, and they got a new shipment of pens for signing the checks. And the pens, like half of them don't work. And I was talking to them about this the other day, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we requisitioned better pens, but the people in the purchasing department overrode it and bought us these instead."
What color are those pens? I have to
They're
ask.
black. They're black. But like what yesterday, I think it took me, I grabbed 5 pens and 4 of them failed.
So you don't have to name names, but is it a corporate franchise chain? Is that what you're have this large
It's
scale?
within a corporate franchise chain.
Okay. Because see, that's partly when you see the growth, right? Each of these contexts we're talking about, like Richard's examples, are easier to do when you have a smaller organization that people can have that personal touch, or you're a customer.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, I know there's a few data people here, computer. So the world for me, like what you guys are talking about, the system, yeah, you're employee to employee, but when you're a customer and I call healthcare, right, it's very discouraging, these algorithms, and that's the direction of the world. I don't want to be a downer, I apologize, but it is, because you guys see it and you can maybe make an impact. But to me, this is part, coming back to Richard, is like when I go to get my insurance, when I call, I go through this algorithmic and this is the world they're headed, right? Is even our businesses, we're automating AI. And to me, I think comes back to who responsibility for these algorithms. Otherwise, they're automated, right? And then it's out of control. I can't, some of this, I get frustrated because my doctor prescribes what, and then I have to go, but it doesn't work. And people inside don't even know how it works. So coming back to how Richard is like, some of these systems are, but I don't have an answer other than just, you have to fix what you can. But
right, we've just been layering complexity on top of itself for centuries, millennia,
right?
like that's just how civilization works, and we keep layering all these parts on top of each other, and it's just getting more and more difficult to navigate for us poor humans with monkey brains, right?
But how would, so coming back to Richard, if I'm trying to practice, okay, the theory is, let's say this organization, and I know there's not going to be one answer, but you have these leaders or managers, right? And they've got this system, and maybe the point is you don't let it get off the rails too far. But how do we navigate these systems, whether it's AWS or the planes, or right? These are complex systems, these organizations, and having one manager or even a team, is that going to work, to have a bunch of Deming managers? Do you think, could they fix some of these organizations?
Well, I think Deming would have said you need that, right, to fix these organizations, but it doesn't feel like we're going that direction.
But so we're talking about it though. So if we had the Deming managers, let's say we did, right? We had the leaders, and knowing they're not perfect, I'm just trying to visualize, okay, so, and that organization doesn't go too far off the rail. Do you guys think that like a board of leaders, like at a medium sized, or some of these, like the restaurant, I don't know how big in the franchise, but would they prevent the pens? Could they prevent the pens? If you had a couple Deming leaders.
Okay, so I think let's use the example I gave, right? As a real world example, right? Ideally, the lead in a Deming led or a more Deming aware organization, they'd have delegated the task of choosing the pens and what to buy entirely to the little outpost on the edge, and they would be able to choose they chose a product, and they would not be second guessed on that. They would just be like, yeah, you've decided that that's the right thing to use, right? But I think, right, we are going back to the control thing we were talking about, control and fear, right? For whatever reason, there's a group inside that organization. It's like, oh no, spending $2 on pens versus $1 on pens, it's just too much, right? Gotta keep those costs under control.
It's like
Even if it cost, right, it cost me multiple minutes of my time, and that is very expensive, right?
Yes,
So
that's the in a Deming organization, you would expect that if a purchase got made that ended up being 4 out of every 5 pen that was purchased didn't work, that there'd be a that made that decision would recognize the result of that decision and take appropriate action.
yep.
Yeah, it
Maybe
comes
the
down to
incentive
like
that's. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it comes down to like what Deming was saying about not treating each department as a profit center, or like it's just like the pen buying person shouldn't be trying to make money, or or worry that much about cost versus the like you said, Ben, like the front line, the edge, right, the server
Yeah.
trying to sell an extra piece of cake or something.
So be
Right,
interesting.
it's not like the restaurant wants to buy a multi-$100 Mont Blanc to hand out to the tables and have, right. They're like, we would like $1.50 a piece pen so that the thing works reliably.
Maybe just publish a disclaimer. If you eat here, bring your own pen.
Yeah, we all know it's frustrating when the pen doesn't write, and then you're trying to write it, and sometimes it's the paper, but often, yeah, if the ink just isn't flowing,
It's
a ballpoint.
right. The problem is that it's a combination of issues, right? It can be the pen itself, the paper that you're trying to write on, the surface that you're trying to write on top of is not right, does not give the right text, doesn't have the right texture to like have the pen work.
Right.
So
It could be temperature too, because I know
could be, yeah, because when it's cold,
climate,
pens won't
sometimes
flow.
when it's colder, the viscosity of the ink, right, can
Mhm.
stiffen up. So it's interesting, all these variables.
That's why
Deming gave
Bill's
us the. Sorry.
That's why Bill's red pen, blue pen company thing is so much fun, because think of all the things that you can talk about.
But you had black pens. I don't know where those
In this case, yes. Go ahead, Richard.
Oh yeah, I was only going to say that he gave us an example, didn't he, at the end of the chapter? Because he talks about on their honor they paid, and so he gave this scenario where they used to have the rules and the regulations if somebody passed away in your family and how many days leave of absence you could have, and everybody maximized the system because there were rules there. That's what was available to them, and they did away with the rules, and they said, well, we'll pay according to you because we do trust you, and they saw that they didn't have to pay as much. So I think that in itself is almost like our pen example, isn't it? It shows how a Deming style organization might run as opposed to a control and command organization, because it's
the same thing happened in the California system for teachers. You get 1 day sick leave for every month, and the school year is 10 months, so you get 10 sick days a year, and you can save them up. If you only use 1 day that first year, the second year, you've got 19 days and so on. And that's a state law that's set up that way. There are some districts who operated differently and said, you can have whatever time off you need, go take it off. When you take the districts that said you can have whatever time you want off, their rate of sick time was lower than the ones that were given the 10 days that they could save up.
Yeah. Knowledge of psychology.
Yep.
Oh, so is that why they've been pushing unlimited time off in the tech industry?
I don't know. I don't know if the school system's still doing the 10-day thing. I imagine they're a pretty
They're
tough
very slow to
rubber
change.
band. Yeah, I remember stretching them a little bit, and it only took if it wasn't anything really tough, it could last maybe 6 months before somebody figured out it ought to snap back to what it used to be. So, but it's tough in a school system. It's not easy anywhere. It takes a dedicated group who want the transformation to happen, and they have to be persistent, and they have to have all the qualities of what Deming calls a leader. They have to be able to offer a plan and be able to explain it and be able to help people move into that new view of the world without feeling guilty about the past. All of that.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
And part of the, just thinking about the sick leave or similar kind of things, bereavement leave. If we treat the occasional abuse of said enlightened policy as a special cause, then we're going to regress back to the restrictive policy. But in fact, there's further analysis that could be, well, if you've got this humane policy, why do people feel the need to quote abuse it or do something, try to take advantage of it? And that's still, I think, in the realm of common cause.
Well, right. I'd say that the probably the reason people are taking advantage of it is maybe because they come from organizations where they didn't have that trust, and so they're not used to working in an organization that does trust them, and you have to navigate all of that.
I got to get my own or someone else. It's a zero sum kind of thinking.
Yes.
In some way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't
Brilliant.
so? If I'm following your examples right, because it does bring it back to kind of the you brought it up again, Stephen, is the common cause, special cause, but a certain number of, even in a trusting organization, because I don't think there's ever 100%, everybody's always 100% trustful, or they make a mistake. It's not intentionally right, and they don't follow whatever guideline, or that's not even there if it's not there. But isn't that part of special cause? You're just going to have outliers. I don't know if that's really statistic, how you, and because I'm not a stat, but there's that, the upper limit and the lower limit of these control charts, I think, is where I'm saying it. Within a common cause system, you're having these, some of these are going to be spikes or valleys, where whatever it is, even if it's somebody who's not trusting in the system, or by accident they don't take the sick leave, or
Sure.
But you don't want to create management or policies that address the lower 2% or whatever that is. If you want to create a trusting organization, you do that, and you have the 2 or 3% at the bottom that will try to take advantage of the system. If you try to cater policies to the lower 2 or 3%, that means you're creating an organization of mistrust throughout the entire remaining 97%, and that is the kind of damage that will really hurt the organization.
I would offer, if you're collecting data like, time off for sickness or anything else, and you find somebody's outside of the norm, that you have an idea what the norm is. This is outside it. That's a signal. Now you need to go investigate and understand whether it's just normal variation or whether there's something going on, and whether you need to do anything about it or not.
Yeah, and even if it's special cause, it doesn't mean it's malicious intent.
Exactly.
You could have a family member with a long-term illness, and right now you're the only capable caregiver. And so if you ask that question, maybe that's the answer you get. But if you just presume that, oh, this guy's just trying to take advantage of the system, well, no, that's distrust on your part. Let's have that conversation. One of the things one of the guys I work with taught me very early on, nobody comes to work to do bad work. Nobody comes to work to F things up. They do their best. And so you don't sit there and point at somebody and say, oh, this guy's a total screw up. No, he's not. He's doing his best. It's just a system that doesn't work. And the same thing applies here. Nobody comes to work to take advantage of payroll so they can get as much money out for the least amount of work. People want to come to work in a trusting environment where they feel not only the transaction for the dollars and cents for hours of labor, but also the other part that people are seeking. They don't say it out loud, and they're not even aware of it. Is there's a thing called pride in workmanship, right? And people want to come to work and feel like they're doing something valuable. That's the intangible. And when people start taking advantage of, like HR policies that say, hey, I could take unlimited time off and I still get paid for it. Well, guess what? You just robbed yourself of dignity of work. And you're going to make adjustments to that because dignity of work is important. That's why you wake up in the morning. You don't wake up in the morning to get a paycheck. You wake up in the morning to feel useful. Coming from a retired guy, but
Peter Schultes has an example. He has a group of management together, and he says, "You guys in your organizations, you have dead wood, don't you? Raise your hands." And a bunch of people raise their hands, and and he says, "So you know who they are?" And they're all saying, "Yes, yes, yes." And he said, "When you hired them, were they like that? Did they come to work like that?" And they all say, "No, no, no, no." And Peter says, "What'd you do to kill them?"
Right. And right, this is right. Deming is all about, right? The management's role is to manage the environment in which all the trees live. It's the forestry, you're the forestry service, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like he said, a manager of people understands that people are different from each other,
Right.
right? So to your example, Yoshio, like the person that is taking a lot of sick days, maybe they have a disability, or maybe they are gaming the system, right? In which case, but they're different, right? Like they're different than the average worker or whatever.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that they're bad or they're wrong, like just because they have a disability, right? That's up to the manager to work with that person and understand how they can optimize the system to make it work for them too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, going back
Right.
to the concept of joy and work or pride in workmanship, if 97% of the population comes to work every day and does good work and they're happy at the end of the days that they work, and this guy shows up after his 3 month leave of absence or whatever, and he got paid for it, he comes back and says, huh, they're really enjoying their work. Maybe I want a little piece of that too. So there's always a little bit of peer pressure that can work to kind of help mitigate the what do you call it, the freeloaders in the system. So there's a lot of good things that can happen in a trusting organization. Things kind of work themselves out if the general population has a trusting relationship amongst themselves and amongst the leaders, amongst the policies.
Yeah, there was an interesting discussion of this in an interview about Valve software a bunch of years ago. Talking about, right, Valve has their own like sort of weird model where there are no managers. It's just kind of giant free for all. Um, and everyone's trying to make decisions about like what to work on themselves and creating little like dynamic groups to do that work and ship things and stuff. Um, but it was very interesting because they were talking in this interview. They were talking about how do you like function in that environment, and like, and you know, there's a lot of like, oh, you know, you'll see people like working on something and you'll be like, oh, that's interesting, and you'll go work on them and talk to them, and then but the, you know, if someone's not able to do that, they stop working on all projects and they're just kind of like floating around unattached. And like, how do you identify that, right? And it's a little harder, but it feels like a strange approach to like Deming style organization. I'll see if I can find a link to that also.
Is that
Deming,
That's another
holacracy?
econ talk episode.
Holacracy. I think we talked.
Yeah, we were talking about holacracy the other holacracy, I believe it was.
Yeah.
I went and I was reading about that. It turns out that Zappos abandoned that model
Go there.
and moved to something else.
Sure. Yeah.
there are
I was part of a holacracy organization for about 4 years from the inception of that application to when I retired, and it worked really well. It was a small consulting firm, but yeah, we
How many people on the inside?
between 15 and 20 probably.
Okay, that's a good size. And you had a good experience with the more very, very boundaryless or open kind of.
Yeah, it was well, I don't want to hijack our meeting here. I'm happy to talk about it some other time, but yeah, I just holacracy is just another structure.
Yeah.
there are quite a few organizations, not big corporations that I know of, that are organized around what we call self-organizing, self-directed teams.
Yeah.
That's there's nothing wrong with that. That's a structure.
Yeah.
It's not a hierarchy, it's a structure. And the self-organizing, and I find it interesting here at this company years ago, a guy who's really good at working with people, John O'Donnell, had 15 people working for him, and he worked with them to learn what their responsibilities were. So very Deming-like, they understood the system they were part of and how they fit into it. And he managed them, and he got to the point where he went to his boss and said, I want to turn this team into a self-managed department, let them go and find something else for me to do. Give up my job because they can do it. And it lasted about 14 months. And the difficulty was the executives wanted to be able to point at a belly button and get whatever they wanted instantaneously, even though the group was managing itself and everybody was responsible and they responded to requests and they worked with each other to satisfy them. This management couldn't deal with the fact that they didn't have somebody to go poke at.
Well, see, but then they just needed to wait it out until an AI was available, and then they could just be like, "This is Frank the AI," and you talk, right. You set it up in Slack, and the managers can talk to that, and you just don't tell them that Frank is a bot.
Yes.
Don't bother me. Talk to Frank.
Is poke, can we say poke is kind of, maybe blame is too strong, but is that also, or was that not part of the culture? Or were they looking for somebody when things went wrong they could blame?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
I want an answer now, and their now might be 30 seconds instead of 30 minutes, and it might have taken them longer. They were a pretty responsive group whenever I had to interact with them. And I think there's some of the, well, you know, if something doesn't happen right, who do we kick in the rear?
Right.
But obviously, all they needed to do was have an on-call rotation. It's like, oh, just call this number and someone will be available, and someone was responsible for answering that phone, and you just rotate it between the team.
Yeah.
The team scapegoat for the week, or they fun.
Scapegoat for the day.
For the day.
Thank you for your call. We are experiencing high calls at the moment. If you'd like to leave a message, we'll get back to you.
Yeah, fuck off, basically.
Yeah. I was at a leadership training session a long time ago, and everybody, they went around asking, "What's your goal? What's your goal? What's your goal?" And I said, "My goal is to make myself obsolete." And some people laughed at that, and I said, well, no, here's why. Because I want everybody that below me to know that there's a path up for them, that I'm not just parked in this position, keeping you down. And also, I want you guys to be able to start learning how to make decisions and take on leadership roles, take on responsibilities. That's what I mean by making myself obsolete. Because I want to go somewhere else too at some point in my life. And it worked out pretty good. But the concept of making yourself obsolete was so foreign to everybody else in the room that they thought I was joking around. In some way, you have to, it sounds like a joke, but it's a dead serious mindset if you want to create a self-starting, self-managing organization that is
Mhm.
self-motivated.
Yeah.
I
It
had a
might
job
be,
where
it might be illegal to have a public corporation that is self-organizing and self-managed, because I don't think the SEC wants that. They want a board. If there's not a board,
Yeah,
you can't have
they want the belly button.
Yep.
Yeah. Hey, Steve, before you run off, I want to have a conversation with you one day.
Yeah, yeah. Send me
Okay,
an
I'll just,
email. I got lots of time.
okay, I'll just call you one day, or I'll just send you an email and ask.
Email is probably better. Yeah, I don't answer phone too often.
Perfect, Steve. Thank you. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
yeah,
So
I had a
Are-
job where I just kept automating my work until I didn't do those things anymore and I delegated it to a piece of software.
Yeah. So according to the clock, time is up.
Oh, before we punch out, I want to make another observation, if that's okay.
Yes.
At the end of managing people, we talk about, grading at schools, in schools.
Yeah.
A few years ago, there was I think something called the last lecture given by a guy named Randy Pausch. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that lecture. He was a professor at, I think it was RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic, and he was dying. And so they had this program where they asked professors, say, if you had to give one last lecture, what would you say? And people got up there and probably and would get up and give a speech. Well, this guy was dying of cancer, pancreatic cancer, so this was literally going to be his last lecture. And what he did was he had science people work with art people, different ends of campus work together on different projects. And at the end of the semester or whatever the period was, instead of giving out grades, what they did instead was they had each team member rate every other team member on whether they would like to have the other person join them on a team for the next project. And that was, that's definitely a different way of maybe rating somebody, or at least assessing the level of learning, than having a teacher do it, but having your peers do it, and not on technical content, but actually a desire to work together, a desire to be part of a team. So it's not like saying somebody's a better person, but that person actually helps to bring out the best in me. So I was just thinking about trying to get your feedback, Tim, or anybody else, about that as a means of not grading, but maybe just evaluating a student's performance at the end of a semester.
That doesn't
Yeah,
sound like crazy to me. It doesn't sound crazy to me.
Yeah. Randy Punch, it's I think about an hour long. It's really well worth it. I think
we frequently, having come from teaching for 8 years, we frequently make the mistake of deciding that we know learning takes place but requires feedback. What we don't recognize is a whole bunch of stuff that we call feedback isn't feedback. It's competition between different people in the within the students are competing with each other. It's a terrible mistake. So
Right. That's basically the crux of most of Alfie Kohn's work. Essentially, is that idea. I just finished reading Punished by Rewards, and it was fascinating and depressing at the same time. There was if you haven't listened to the latest episode of the Deming Institute podcast, with, who was that with? Lyle Jenkins. That was super interesting, talking about how he's been some of the approaches they're taking to doing like assessment of schooling and stuff, and trying to get it so that the class is learning as a group, and so you're scoring the class as a group and doing things like testing the class on the entirety of the contents of the class from the beginning. So you're essentially picking the random questions that you're going to use for quizzes are picked from the complete sample of questions that would exist for the entire topic over the entire class time. It was super interesting.
Yeah, send the link. I can send it out to everybody.
All right.
Did you say the end?
Oh, what else?
Did you mention the end of average? I can't remember the author. Is that what you just mentioned, the book, The End of Average?
Oh, I don't know that one.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard that. Maybe I just filled in the blank. That's a kind of an interesting one that talks. I think it came recommended through some of these events. It's a bit statistical, but it's also he gives some pretty interesting examples from school. I think he talks about the Air Force, how they design planes for average, right? And then they kind of went to a different design.
Oh, this sounds
yeah.
Oh, what was it? In Gary Hustwit's Objectified. It's a documentary about industrial design. He talks about OXO and and how they design their products, and he goes and talks with them about how they look and they try and design their products around catering to essentially the extremes. Like, so if you're building a pair of like garden shears, you will look at people who are older as can I make this work well for someone with like mobility challenges or things like that. I'll link that as well. That's Gary Hustwit did a trilogy of documentaries, starting with one about called Helvetica, which is about
The font.
the font. Yes, it's about graphic design, and then he did a second one about he did Objectified, which is about industrial design, and Urbanized, which is about the design of cities.
Cool.
Oh yeah, that's that whole thing about the design of urban. There's kind of a long history there. I've read some, right, how cities, because that's a bigger system, right? than
Yeah.
Cultures. And who was it? Famous guy. His name is Lewis Mumford. He wrote some interesting books. He's very Lewis Mumford. So anyway, good stuff. I appreciate these conversations, gentlemen. And I know Yoshio and both Tim you guys are retired, right? You guys don't currently work like your 9 to 5s. I know you probably do other stuff.
Well, I work, 10 to 4 or something. Whatever.
Hours.
I have a limit. They won't let me work more than 40 hours, and I don't want to work more than 40, so it works just great.
Okay, so you still working at the Rocketdyne facility?
I'm at the Rocketdyne facility, but instead of building the rockets, I'm a representative of NASA, so I'm buying the rockets from them.
I see. So you buy the pens, but you buy good pens. Hopefully.
Yes, yeah, we test the hell out of them, that's for sure.
And when this thing blows ink, it really blows ink.
Yeah. Yes.
So Tim, are you paid by NASA or are you paid through Rocketdyne?
No, there are 8 of us here, 3 civil servants, and five of us work for a consulting firm that does safety and mission assurance contracts for NASA. I'm a contractor completely. The name of the organization is Bastion Technologies. the others that work for Bastion are employees of Bastion, but I'm not a civil servant. I'm a contractor working through the Bastion Technologies contract. So
Yeah. The reason I'm asking is because the whole 737 MAX debacle at Boeing and a few other things, that was because the FAA representatives, they called ARs, authorized representatives, they are accountable to the FAA, but they were on Boeing's payroll.
oh no,
And tell me how that's not a conflict of interest.
yeah, that's yeah. There certainly you need as a government contractor, you need to be sensitive to the fact that the government thinks you can do a really good job. That's why they hired you, but they do have some oversight to make sure slip ups don't happen. And that's, if we're on your payroll, we might not be looking as hard for slip ups as we could be.
That's correct. All right.
So are you, Tim, then you're physically at that location where years
Yeah.
ago came to and they had the big rocket out in the
Yep.
parking? Chatsworth, I think it's the city of Chatsworth.
Yeah, it's on the border of Chatsworth. The shipping address is Chatsworth, but the office address is Canoga Park.
Oh, okay. Well, I appreciate the go ahead.
I used to work at out in Northridge when I was working in the film industry. So
Nearby.
Yeah.
You are true to your LinkedIn, master, jack of all trades, master of some. So yeah.
Very few.
So all right. Well, thank you, Tim, for organizing these, and Yoshio. I know you guys, right, and also Ben. And so I'm going to bow out because I'm in the Midwest.
Yes.
And getting late, but I appreciate the opportunity to connect with you all and look forward to next week.
Yes. Let's have some fun next week too.
Take care.
What chapter next week, Tim?
What's that?
Chapter 7 next
7
week?
and 8.
7 and 8, okay.
Yeah.
Pretty much each 2 weeks, two chapters a week. Is that how we're working?
I'll send it out. I'm pretty sure it's 7 and 8. I don't have my note with me, but
Okay.
I think it's 7. I'll send something out tomorrow or the day after.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good evening, guys.
You
Bye,
too.
y'all.
Ciao.
Oh, man.
Oh, I'm the owner of the meeting now.
Oh, save
So
the
I'll hit the
recording.
I'll hit the stop recording.
Yeah, save it to the cloud.